Welcome back to the King's Report for Thursday, January 18th, 2018. Tim Miller sitting in for the second king of Chumley, Hyung, speaking to all the kings and queens of God's kingdom throughout the world. Our guest this morning is Cheryl K. Chumley, online opinion editor and opinion editor at the Washington Times. She is an author, writer, and speaker passionate about topics related to Christianity and the country's Judeo-Christian roots, the Constitution, politics, and policy, United Nations and sovereignty issues, Congress and Capitol Hill, pretty much anything that lends itself to exposing those matters that run counter to freedom, biblical principles, and the preservation of America as the greatest country the world's ever seen. Sounds like our type of person, Cheryl. We can relate to that very much. Her publication credits include The Blaze, The Washington Times, LifeZet, is that how you pronounce that? PamelaGeller.com, and more. She is a skilled public speaker and media guest and has made hundreds of appearances on national and local television and radio and in person at various forums and events to discuss politics and culture, the role of Christianity in government, media bias, and limited government principles. Her latest book, The Devil in D.C., Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington, with a foreword by Mike Huckabee, which I understand was published in 2016. It came out a year or so ago. It tells Christians and patriots how exactly to put the nation back under God's control and wrench power from the atheists and progressives who have taken root. Check out what others like radio giant Michael Savage have said about it so far. You can click on that if you go to her website, CherylChumley.com. Good morning, Cheryl. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing great.
See that you are interested in many of the same topics that we deal with here on the King's Report every day. Just to get our discussion started, I just want to review again the fake news awards that President Trump announced yesterday. Of course, number one was New York Times' Paul Krugman claiming on the day of President Trump's historic landslide victory that the economy would never recover. Has the economy recovered?
I think so. I think it has. I think, if you look at all the corporations who have just handed out bonuses and raises and so forth, the companies that are coming back from overseas locations simply because of Donald Trump, that's certainly a check mark in his plus column.
Yeah, the unemployment is down to 4.1%, and some people expect it to go down further to 3.9% of this year. Of course, African-American unemployment and Hispanic unemployment is the lowest it has ever been since those statistics began being recorded, I think in 1972. In other words, he's enabled more African-Americans to be employed than the African-American president, Barack Obama. What's up with that?
It's amazing, isn't it? And you won't hear the mainstream media talk about that at all.
Right. And what the mainstream media was saying a year ago was that when President Trump put out his first budget plan, and he was talking about 3% growth, right? Even 4% growth. What did the economists have to say about that back then a year ago? Irresponsible is the word that I remember. Irresponsible to suggest that the U.S. economy will ever again grow at 3% plus. But it looks like we may have that, right? I mean, the numbers aren't in yet. But the numbers for the second and third quarter are pretty good, and fourth quarter numbers are going to be coming in over the next several weeks. But it looks possible that 2017 may have been a 3% growth year.
It certainly does. And what's even more significant is that upcoming in the next few weeks, people are going to start to notice more money in their paychecks because of the tax cuts that he was able to push through. And this is going to prove a huge win for Trump, especially going into 2018 elections. The economy is almost always the number one concern of American voters, and Democrats aren't going to stand a chance on this.
I think it was Bill Clinton that said it's the economy, stupid, right?
Right, and it still is.
It still is. It still is the economy. Yes, it still is the economy. Yes. But tell us about you're more informed than we are about what's going on in Washington. Tell us about this Mueller investigation thing. What's up with that? What's happening there?
Well, of course, as your readers know, as your listeners know, that the Trump collusion, Russia collusion story also made the fake news list of the year,
Yes.
and rightly so. This is something that has gone on far too long already, and it's been politically charged from the get-go. I wrote early on that Mueller, if he had wanted to have this non-biased, nonpartisan investigation, he should have brought on board more investigators, more attorneys who didn't have past that included massive donations to Democratic candidates. You know, he could have balanced that out a little bit, but he didn't. So from there, and now fast forward all these months later, and still no smoking gun of any type of collusion. I think this whole matter is going to die a slow death. Slow only because Democrats don't want it to die. It's their major impeach Trump fire that they're allowed to fan, and I think that they're going to try and smoke it for all they can. But in the end, you're not going to find any true Russia-Trump collusion allegations that prove true.
Why are the Democrats, and I think also some Republicans, establishment Republicans, neocon Republicans, why they are so obsessed with getting rid of Trump by any means possible? What's behind this?
In my opinion, and I think, I've thought about this a great deal, Trump is a major threat to the establishment. And when you look at the politicians the last few years, and I do write about this at length in my book, when you look at the politicians, they're not divided by party lines. They're basically one and the same once they get to Capitol Hill. You have Republicans always reaching out to Democrats, conceding with Democrats, moving left. And so you don't have this division of political parties. Republicans do not stand anymore for the party of limited government, the party of individual rights, the party of constitutional principles. It's all just one big mash of government first, individual second. Now, Trump came in and he spoke to the American citizen about what he was going to do as president for the American citizen. He was going to tighten borders. He was going to put Americans first. And he did it on the backs of writing his own money to the White House. So he's beholden to few. And I think this is why both Democrats and some in the establishment Republican Party, wing of the party, detest Trump. They see him as a threat to their own power.
Does it have anything to do with a fight over America's Judeo-Christian roots? Is there something going on with that?
Well, I see that as the root of everything. As you remove God from in charge of America, as you take away the notion that our rights as individuals were founded on Judeo-Christian principles, what that does is open the door for government to come in, take over, and exert power on the individual. And if you're a politician, you don't want people turning to God for the solutions. You want them turning to you so you can advance your own political power interests. And so if you look at all politics from the vein that it's taking God out of government and instilling a more burdensome government, things become clearer. The fight to return our country to Judeo-Christian roots become all the more important.
So it's not just taking God out of government, it's actually replacing God with government, isn't it?
Exactly.
That they want government to be the God. They want the government to be the Baal from the Old Testament. The people to worship the government going on there, and that's sort of represented, isn't it, by what's some call the Party of Davos, referring, of course, to the people who gather at the World Economic Forum annually in Davos, Switzerland. And President Trump is actually going there this year, kind of going into the lion's den, isn't he?
When doesn't he? I mean, Donald Trump, if anything, he is bold and he goes where a lot of people already hate him and have their minds made up about him. So good for Donald Trump, because I know when he goes, he's going to represent America's interests and Israel's interests as well. And he's not going to, fall privy to those of the UN and globalists among the world who want to steal nation sovereignty, and number one in their sights, of course, is America.
If you were advising him on what to say at Davos, what are some of the points that you would hope that he would say? to those people, to the party of Davos?
Yeah, I just want Donald Trump to be Donald Trump and talk about the need for America to remain forefront on the world stage. And I want him to talk about America's historic friendship with Israel and how it is still solidified under this administration. And I basically just want Trump to go in and be Trump.
I'm sure he will be. He is all one thing you can depend on President Trump is that he is always Donald J. Trump. He's never anything else. And that's why we love him, and that's why we love him, and others hate him. Frankly, that's wonderful. Let's see some of the other issues in the Paul Krugman, and then some of the other false. The fake news. Oh, by the way, I nominated a candidate for next year's fake news awards.
Already?
And that is Sanjay Gupta of the CNN predicting that Donald Trump is going to have a heart attack.
Good one. That's perfect.
That is my nominee. That is my nomination for next year's awards. Washington Post, here number 5, falsely reported that President's massive sold-out rally in Pensacola, Florida was empty. Dishonest reporters showed pictures of an empty arena hours before a crowd started pouring in. It seems that the mainstream media has given up or just abdicated all pretense of objectivity, and that they're on a mission from their God, apparently, to get rid of Trump, even if it means giving up their journalistic responsibility. Am I right? Is that what's happening here?
I think you are right. And this is a serious matter for the entire American public because the press is the watchdog against government. No matter who's in office, you're supposed to be able to turn to the press to get the unbiased facts, the unvarnished truth, so you yourself as an individual can come to a decision and a determination about where our country is headed. And since day one, I remember specifically CNN coming out and swinging this watchdog label hard, claiming that their job from now on, as long as Donald Trump is in the White House, is to just watch every move he makes and report on everything he does from a negative point of view. And this didn't happen under Barack Obama. The press laid down and let Barack Obama do whatever he wanted. And now all of a sudden, they did. And now all of a sudden they want to take their job seriously under Trump. It's ridiculous and it's dangerous for the cause of freedom in America.
Yeah, I don't think they're really taking their job seriously because I think they've actually forgotten what that job is. Press is supposed to be objective, but clearly it is not being objective at all. Yesterday, was it the CNN White House correspondent was actually kicked out of the Oval Office? The president told him to get out. Well, I have to ask you about the Steve Bannon because, for a long time, I say for the past year or so, we thought, and maybe we were right, maybe we were wrong, that Steve Bannon was the driving engine behind the Trump revolution. And when he left the White House, then it appeared for a while, that maybe the globalists have taken over Trump, and they've isolated him, and Steve Bannon has left the White House to continue the Trump revolution outside the White House. And then Alabama happened, and then now I don't know what's going on. What's up with Steve Bannon? What's going on with that?
Well, I wouldn't give Steve Bannon that much power. The Trump train actually rode into existence because of Trump's tough talk on Kate Steinle out in California. That's what really ratcheted up his presence in America and made America.
The woman was killed by an illegal immigrant.
Exactly. And that's why Americans just latched on to Trump because they thought, here's a guy who's going to speak up for my rights as a citizen and not play this politically correct crap that's been going on for years. So it was after that, that Steve Bannon and his Breitbart news organization came aboard and latched onto Trump. It wasn't the other way around. Bannon didn't create Trump. Trump gave Bannon more prestige. So I think whatever Bannon does in the future, I don't think it's going to impact too much on how Trump governs.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. This it was a kind of a shocking, shall we say, kind of a confusing thing that happened there with the whole thing with the Steve Bannon. But yeah, now he seems to be pretty much out of the news, and Breitbart is continuing without him. He's left the Breitbart as their executive chairman. We'll have to see what kind of direction Breitbart takes from now on. We hope that it can be continue to be a voice for conservatives or bringing news to conservatives that we need to know about. Chinese media this morning are saying that, referring to the United States as the divided states of America. You know, this reminds me very much of Pravda during the days of the Soviet Union. I was telling our viewers about that. But it turns out, though, eventually it does it that America's diversity and sometimes our noisy discussions eventually turn out to be strengths. But what is your view of the future of the American Republic? Is it going to? Do we have a bright future, or are the Chinese right in saying that we're on our way down?
That's a really good question. And under Barack Obama, I was very dark about America's future, especially when it seemed like Hillary Clinton was going to win, because it just seemed like America under a Hillary Clinton administration it would be Obama on steroids, and our nation would crumble from within. But Trump has kind of ushered in this new era of hope. And you don't even have to agree with everything Trump stands for. I certainly don't. But at least he is speaking the language of the spirit of America, America first, make America great again on the economic scale, on the foreign policy scale, and so forth. And that gives a little bit of hope about the future. Now, as a Christian, I know how everything already ends. So whatever happens in this world, I'm already confident about how the final battle ends. So toward that, I would say that our country, our world will never be fully in peace until the final battle. But at least under Trump, we get a kind of reprieve from this globalist UN, one world order type of messaging and pressures that we faced for so many years under the previous administration.
So you've touched on a point that where our pastor and our usual host challenges Christians, where, as you said, as a Christian, you know how it's all going to end. You know how the final battle is going to end. And our pastor says that, okay, that's true. God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, eventually. But as Christians, don't we have to take more responsibility to become more involved in worldly affairs? He is concerned that many Christians may be saying, well, we don't really have to become all that involved in worldly affairs because we already know what's going to happen in the end. Or even that God's kingdom is not of this world. But in order to bring God's victory, don't Christians have to become much more active? Because the left is certainly active. They're extremely active. Christians seem to sort of have this sort of feeling that they don't need to be so active because God's going to take care of it in the end. How do you respond to that?
Well, I responded to that by writing my second book, Devil in D.C. And what that does is tell Christians exactly how to get involved in this world's politics and culture. If you're a Christian who just sits back and says, oh, well, God's got this, I don't have to do anything, I think that's rather a horrific attitude to take. I think you're here on this earth and you need to poke holes in the darkness by using your voice, by using your words, by using whatever talents and seeds that you have within you planted by God. And if you're not willing to fight the enemy, then that's a little weak to me on how you perceive your Christian duties. I think all Christians, in whatever capacity that they're able, need to take this fight to the enemy.
Oh, I'm very encouraged to hear you say that, and I hope more Christians will read your book, and I think we'll also be reading your book here as well, so that Christians can really become more involved in what is going on in politics, because a lot of terrible stuff has happened already, and a lot of this whole thing with the transgenderism whole thing with I could, we could go down a whole list of things that are, homosexuality. The Bible says is an abomination, and yet it has become a situation where you cannot even speak out against it in public society or polite society in the United States today. The United States has moved so far away from God's standard, God's will, and God's desire, and God's ideal. It almost seems as if the Chinese are kind of laughing, and that's really Satan laughing there, I think, saying, "Hey, look how far I've taken the United States away from God's ideal." I certainly hope that Christians can wake up and understand that going to church on Sunday is not enough. That they need to become involved in the politics of their communities and of the nation. Just saying, "Hey, I know I'm saved when I go to after I die," but we need to save this nation. We need to save this nation, bring it back, because this nation was established by God for the salvation of the world, to use as His instrument in the salvation of the world. And Christian civilization has been the source of human rights. Actually, our pastor makes the point that you cannot have human rights without the Judeo-Christian God. Because it is Judeo-Christianity that teaches that even the worst criminal is still a creation of God, a child of God, and deserves due process under the law. And it is the Judeo-Christian Christianity that teaches that men and women are equal, because God created man, created them male and female. So, for example, Islam teaches women basically being chattel, even in their testimony in court. A woman's testimony in Islam is only given half the value of a man's testimony. So that is what you get when you do not have Judeo-Christian ethics, and that Judeo-Christian Christianity is being taken away from Europe, certainly, and already it looks like some countries in Europe are, I would say, Sweden, for example, maybe beyond the point of no return. And Germany as well, France as well, having these no-go zones, and more areas where, because Europe has denied Judeo-Christian Christianity, and as I said, Hillary Clinton was going to take the United States in the same way. Barack Obama is taking the United States in the same way. We really dodged a bullet when Hillary Clinton failed to become a president, and when Donald Trump was successful in becoming president. But I guess, how much hope do you see in the United States maintaining this Judeo-Christian ethic into the next, say, 50, 100 years?
Well, that's why people of Christian faith, people who know better, need to get involved, because we're only one generation or less away from that principle dying. And once that fire goes out on America, once it's removed that our rights come from God, not government, it's going to be impossible to get that back. So if nothing else, as a Christian, that's the fight that you need to make. Our rights come from God. That was a revolutionary idea at the founding of this nation. Absolutely. I think a lot of people take it for granted now, and what's happening in the schools, they're not teaching it. So, Christians, get in the fight. Just at least fight for that one principle, however you can, because our nation's freedoms, our nation's future, your children's future depends on that.
Yes, and Reverend Hyung Moon, our pastor's father and the founder of the Washington Times, by the way, taught that the United States needs to go back to its founding principles. And I think that is very much in line with what you just said, that these principles, one of the main principles in the United States Constitution was that at the end of the 18th century, this idea that rights are natural rights, that our rights are not rights that are given to us by some king or by a government, but that are given to us by God, and that they are universal to all human beings. So all human beings have these same rights, just that some governments choose to block them, whereas in the United States, they are guaranteed to us by the Constitution. But many liberals, I think, right now say that if you believe in the Constitution, that you are some kind of a radical, conservative, racist, homophobic, this, that, and the other thing. But we need to get back, as you said, to the Judeo-Christian roots of the United States Constitution. And that's why our pastor has come out with the Constitution of the Kingdom of God, which is a rewriting of the United States Constitution. It's based on the United States Constitution, but it has God as the king, and as God as the King of Kings. And I encourage everyone to read through this at that time, because this is the way that God intends human beings to live. Because all rights, and all the rights listed in the United States Constitution, by the way, are here. All 10 of them are here in this Constitution. So, because it is by the Judeo-Christianity that God intends to establish his ideal kingdom on this earth. Thank you very much, Cheryl. I know that you have to be get going pretty soon here. You gave us 30 or 40 minutes this morning. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us this morning? How can we find your book? How can we support some of the causes that you are interested in? Can you tell us that?
Sure. Please just go to my website, CherylChumley.com, and I have all my information on the books there. I update it with regular columns. Come see me at the Washington Times, and check out some of the great writings that go on there on a daily basis from the excellent staff that they have there. And if you're a Christian, get in the fight, because this is way too important to just sit back and let God take care of it, or your neighbor take care of it on your behalf.
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. I'm very glad to see such a strong and committed Christian writing for the Washington Times, writing in Washington, D.C., and helping to support Donald Trump as he tries to bring this country back to its original roots. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's take a break now. We'll be back after this with more